Welcome to the Author to Authority podcast, and this is episode 499. Wow. The next episode, the 500th, I have got an incredible special guest for you. I have Dave Sanderson. He is the author of The Limitless Life. He was on the Miracle on the Hudson plane that went down in the Hudson River. So you're not going to want to miss that episode. He also worked with Tony Robbins as head of security for, I think, about 10 years. So he's got an incredible story that he's going to share with you about how to create opportunity out of uncertainty. So make sure that you are here for the next special 500th episode. But today we're going to talk about the 7-step selling process to enroll your ideal client. And one thing that I have learned through this process of many years of entrepreneurship is that if you have a process or a system, something that's duplicatable, then not only can you get predictable results, but you know when and where that you will get results. So I'm excited for today's conversation, and I want to welcome Brook Bishop to the show. He has 20 plus years in the business of personal development and human elevation. Brook experiences span from business consulting, practice management, personal and business coaching, live events, and product development and launches. He is also the author of a book, and we're going to be talking about that later today. Welcome to the show, Brook.
No, thank you for having me here, and I'm excited. 499, and then the fact you got Dave on number 500, that's freaking cool. And I worked with Tony Robbins for 15 years as his executive director of business mastery. So I actually got to see Dave quite a bit when he was doing his security work for Tony. So small world.
Yeah, Dave launched his newest book, The Limitless Life, back in January, and he did a
Awesome.
whole ceremony in New York City to thank the responders. It was 15 years ago that this happened. It's
Cool.
been an incredible journey for him.
Very, very cool. Love that.
So, Brooke, I want to just start off with something that's just really obvious. And, the question I was thinking of is, how important is it to have that, selling process in place?
If you're in business, it's mission critical. So in our world, we look at the game of business, and really, it truly is a game, right? There's rules, and there's winners, there's losers, there's timeouts, right? There's all these different pieces that play into it. So we've chunked business into 3 buckets. You have marketing, you have sales, and you have fulfillment. That's it. So oftentimes we make things way more complex than it needs to be. But yeah, when it comes to business, you might have the world's best marketing, but if you can't enroll people consistently, no matter what it is, if you don't have consistent enrollments, you're going to have challenges. Now, consequentially, down the other end of that, if you're not delivering a high quality product, you're not going to be in business for very long, right? Because competition will take you out,
Yeah.
or bad news will travel and people won't buy your product or service. So you need to have those 3 buckets really dialed in. In my experience, in my opinion, sales is that it's the bridge. It's also the holy grail of business that most people want to avoid because they feel like they have to, they feel like sales is a 4-letter word. It's this icky thing, and it gives people anxiety, and you know, it can feel funky at times. So yes, long answer to your question, sales is mission critical, and having a rinse repeat process, it's paramount, because if it's not working, you're not going to know what to change in order to get things back on track.
Love it. Love it. It's funny. We all become entrepreneurs, but it's not because we want to sell. It's usually either we have something that's going to help somebody, whether a product, a service, whether we have a heart to see people's lives change. It's never that we got into this like, I want to sell, right? And then you become an entrepreneur and you realize that you have to sell. And it's like, but you're
It's a
right,
very
it
scary
is
thing.
mission critical. If you don't have sales, you only have a hobby.
Yeah, it's very true. And most people out there, by the way, that's why so many businesses do fail. So when you look at the statistics of it, not to go doom and gloom, but at the end of the day, very, very few businesses are successful. And when you compare, you look at somebody who starts their own business, less than 5% are in business 10 years down the road. Whereas you take something like a franchise, they've got like an 80 to 82% success clip. Why? Because they've got systems and process and procedure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, we're going to get into the 7 steps, but I think once you have a good solid system in place, it makes selling easier. You don't have to think things through. You're not having to sort of fake it till you make it. You just take things step by step by step, and you recognize that not everybody is going to reach the last step. There's, going to be people stop at each step, but over time, as you work the system and you become more comfortable with it, what I found was that, selling was just a natural progression of the conversations I was having with people. And when I did those conversations the right way, the systematic way, sort of the same way each time, by the end of the conversation, it just usually made really good sense for us to work together.
Now, I love that. And it's very, very true. And you hit on just actually a couple interesting pieces. One is you've got to know your numbers. And so if you're going to talk to 10 people, you've got to know going in that 2 out of those 10 will never be the right fit. And that'll help keep your head screwed on straight, because you can look at it
Yeah.
as somewhat of a numbers game where it's like, okay, that person was not the right fit, or my product or service was not the right solution. You can let them go versus letting it just eat you up emotionally and feeling like you're losing. And I think that that's just a huge piece, is we're just seeing so many people that are burning out because they're wanting that result to be so, one way, and they're not approaching it in a strategic way. So yeah, the step-by-step piece, if you're baking a cake, if you switch the flour and the frosting, we're going to have different outcomes. And so knowing what steps to do and just knowing that you're following the right process, knowing that it's ultimately going to take you to a cake. And sometimes we get jacked up cakes. So that's okay. It's part of the process of baking. So
Jim Rohn, I was listening many, many years ago. I was listening to a CD by Jim Rohn, and it set me free. And in this, it was actually, I think he designed the teaching and training for those like in network marketing, MLM, but I mean, it applies to any type of sales situation. And he started talking about baseball, and, my eyes kind of glazed over as I was listening to it. I'm not a big sports person, but he said, "Do you know what a 300 batting average means?" And I'm thinking, nope. He says, "These baseball players strike out 7 out of 10 times, strike out 7 out of 10 times, and they make millions of dollars." And I went, my jaw dropped. I couldn't believe it. He says, "You can strike out 7 out of 10 times." He says, "If you strike out 8 out of 10 times," he says, "you're not a millionaire." He says, "But you're making pretty good money." He says, "But if you can consistently, sorry, 4. If you strike out 4, 6 out of 10 times, you're still making hundreds of thousands of dollars. But if you strike out 7 out of 10 times, you're making a lot of money." It set me free. And I thought, wow. And then, when you talked about numbers, Jim Rohn said, and again, I'll never forget this, it totally changed. He said, "I could win any sales competition I joined, not because I was the best." He says, "I wasn't the greatest salesperson." He said, "But I knew my numbers. So I knew exactly what it was going to take to reach any sales goal I needed to. And then I just had to decide, could I put in enough time? Could I put in enough effort to generate the leads and convert those leads into sales?" And most times he could. So he won competitions not because he was the greatest salesperson, but because he had the best work ethic and he knew his numbers.
no, I love that. And in the spirit of numbers, and Jim was just a brilliant human being. Uh, but when you look at those numbers, we're talking about there's 2 out of 10 that'll just never, doesn't matter what you might bring a winning lottery ticket and they're not going to think that it's a real lottery ticket and they still won't take it from you. right? You're going to have at the other end of that spectrum, you'll have two people that, because it's just the right time and it's the right solution, most people average around 20% sales, right?
Mm,
Now, if you're less than 20%, Houston, we have a problem, because that means that you are selling people out of your product or service, right? Now,
yeah.
to your point, and I love that you brought up the math on it, because the ones who just do next level, they're the ones who figured out the six in the middle, right? So
Yeah.
they have a process, or they have a strategy, or they have a different way of communicating, or they have a different mindset, they have a different flow. They're able to enroll the six that are in the middle that might be somewhat on the fence. They have those tools and those skills, or they have a process to tip them towards their favor. So yeah, no, you're speaking my language, girl.
Well, we are going to stop for a quick ad break. Audience, I'm going to share with you a resource from RTI Publishing, and you know that we help write books that convert readers into clients. We will be right back. Welcome back. Brooke, I have been so enjoying this conversation so far. Let's get into the 7 steps, because first of all, I'm curious. Second along, I think I know some of them. So as you're going along, I'm going to do the checklist in my mind to make sure that, hey, I'm on the right track. And then we will talk about it. So I'm going to let you loose to share about those 7 steps.
Rock on. Yeah. So 7 steps, just for anyone who's listening to this episode, as well as for you, Kim. One thing just to remember: sequence is everything. So if we're doing the right thing and we're doing it at the wrong time, it very quickly becomes the wrong thing. Okay. So
So true.
and this is what we see with sales. And as I lay out these 7 steps, what I'll probably do, just to make things interesting today, is I'll probably share more of what not to do versus what to do, just because I think oftentimes that can be more impactful for anyone who's in a sales engagement. So what I would let everybody understand is we've reverse engineered this process. Whereas most people in the sales training space, or if they're like, hey, here's a script to follow or something of that nature, they're like, go front to back. We actually went back to front. So we went from the vantage point of, how do we get to a yes? If that's our outcome, is a yes. And even beyond that, we want somebody who's going to purchase again ongoing. If that's our outcome, how do we back into that all the way up to step number 1? So as we're laying this out, just kind of know that that's the framework, as we're going to go front to back and laying it out, but it was crafted and built back to front. If that wasn't confusing, go rewind this thing and listen again. All right. So step number 1 is what we refer to that as is intro or pre-frame. So if anybody's in the world of NLP, the pre-frame is where we're going to let people know what we're doing, why we're doing it. And this is a really critical variable that I don't hear many people dig into. In order to exceed someone's expectations, we need to know what they are. And most people in a sales engagement are telling people what they're going to expect versus asking people what they're expecting. Okay, so the intro pre-frame this is where you want to make sure you're not going to get time closed. If there needs to be other decision makers that are there, this is a space where we're going to let them know our intentions for our engagement. And then we're going to ask them, hey, what are you hoping to gain from today? What are you hoping to take from our engagement, our conversation today? Okay. If they're out in left field, we've got to address that now, right? Additionally,
I'm going to stop you.
Yeah, go for it.
Because, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, and usually I don't, but you know, if you're listening to this, I really want you to catch what he just did there, because he opened up the conversation by letting the person know what his expectations were, but then he stopped and he asked the other person what their expectations are. And audience, I want you to get this. That is, if that's the only thing you take from today in your sales conversations, is to ask them what their expectations are, how do they want to proceed? Those are powerful questions in a sales conversation, and you're letting them make the decision, which empowers them. So they feel like they're in control. You might be guiding the whole conversation, But by asking certain questions, they feel like they're in charge. It's brilliant, Brooke. I love it.
Well, and the reality is the buyers of today are very different than 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years, 10
Mhm.
years ago, right? Whereas most of the sales training that's out there is running processes that were made in the 80s, right? That's where most of the sales that's out there today. So if we look at healthy relationships, it requires a
Mm,
mutual exclusivity. There needs to be a conversation of what are your expectations? What are mine? Here's where I'm at. So if we can start off from that framework, we're already going to set ourselves up way ahead of any of our competitors. Now,
yeah.
what's really important is if they have expectations that are unrealistic, we have to address that versus just snow plowing past it, knowing that they have expectations we can't meet. So we need to have an integritous, authentic dialogue around that.
Mm,
Now, if and or you get to a place where you have expectations that are a match, the number one thing that consumers need right now, above all else, is certainty. People
yeah.
are screaming for security and certainty. Okay, so give them that. If you have the same intentions and it's like, hey, oh my gosh, heck yeah, we're gonna rock and roll today. I'm so excited that we've met and that we get to have this dialogue today. Give them that certainty. Okay, don't sit back and go. Okay, so pre-frame or intro is number one. Number two is what we would refer to as the discovery. Now, I'm just going to give two rules on discovery because I think these are where most people screw up, right? And this is where, for a lot of people in the sales game, this is where the wheels fall off. Rule number one: you are not allowed to sell at all in discovery. Okay, so I'm going to say that again because this is again the most time. Anytime we hear somebody's calls where they're screwing things up, they're selling too quick. Okay,
Yep.
to put context around this is like if you went to a car dealership and you walk on the lot and the car dealer or the car salesman goes, "Oh, what kind of car are you looking for?" "Oh, I'm looking for a black vehicle." And they immediately take you over to all the black vehicles, right? They've only got one piece of information and then they're immediately trying to sell and they're trying to push you where they want to push you. Don't do that. And then to give another metaphor or an analogy, this is like going to the doctor's office and you walk in and you sit down and they go, "Oh, headaches. Interesting. I think you should take Viagra." And you're like, "Wait, what? That's one symptom I've got. That's not even the main symptom. Like my arm's bleeding out right now." Right? And they start pushing you into a prescription. They wouldn't do that for very long because they'd be out of practice. However, this is the number one area we see salespeople do. Somebody says, "Oh, I have this problem." They immediately go, "Oh, here's how you can solve that. Or here's why we're the best thing since sliced bread." Hold back, have some restraint. Don't do that. Okay, so rule number one: do not sell too quickly. Number two is you need to find three reasons. There's a strategic scientific reason behind this. You've got to have three reasons why they need your product or service. Here's the key word: now. So, three reasons why they need your
Mm,
product or service right now.
yeah.
Okay. If you can't get to those, you stay in discovery until you find those three reasons, and they've got to have a sense of urgency. They've got to have some
Yeah.
fire underneath them. Okay. So that's the land of discovery. You should be spending about 40% of your engagement with the prospect in discovery. Okay.
Yeah.
Now we move from discovery. We have what's called a test close. This is where we get to ask permission again. We're going to test the waters to find out all that information they just shared with us over in discovery. Are we tracking on the right wavelength? Are we in agreement with where we're at? Are we seeing the same picture? So it looks something like this. So Kim, you just shared with me that you're looking to accomplish X, Y, Z, these three things. You've been experiencing these things for this long. It's leading to this amount of pain. If I could show you a way to remedy that today, would you be interested in what I have to share with you? Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Love it.
If they say no, that's our cue. We missed something. We go back into discovery. Okay. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Go back. If they say, well, heck yes, cool. Now we move forward. Okay. So we've got pre-frame, discovery. We've now tested the waters before we move forward. We're now going to go into step 4, which is our solution or our value add.
Mm,
This is where we're going to show our framework. We're going to show them some form of value add where we get to impact and improve their life at some capacity. We're going to give them something tangible they can put in a wheelbarrow and walk out the door with it. Okay. In our world, we work with predominantly with coaches or consultants, experts, authors, right? So people who have some form of an expertise that they're sharing with their clientele. So we actually teach a whole process, and we won't have time to dig into all these. But we call it the 6 cylinders to success, which if you have a lisp, it's really hard to say that. But it's basically our proprietary process. Now we're going for alliterations. It's a tangible. It's something we can share with people. This is our expertise. This is the value, what we provide, but it also correlates back to what came up in the discovery process. Okay.
When you talk about that, so many times I've had, you know, everyday people, not only everyday people, but experts, sales marketings, they'd be like, don't give it away unless they hand you money. Don't give anything away. I have found the exact opposite to be true. Now,
Agreed.
obviously, as a book publisher, sometimes people ask me how to write a book. I tell them,
Yeah, because you already know
now,
they're
are
not
they
going
going
to
to
go
be
do
able to
it.
do it? No. Uh, most cases, no. There are some, but the thing is that, people tell me, "Oh, you're giving away too much knowledge." Well, I don't give my products and my services away for free. But I have found by being generous with my knowledge that it actually attracts people to me. They're like, "Kim, you're different." Like I've got other, publishers or whatever. They won't tell me anything. I'm like, "I'll tell you anything you want. Ask me any question. I'll answer it for you." Right? Now, I'm not going to do the work for them, I will occasionally, if people submit books, I will do a free, book assessment for them to let them know if they're on the right track. But, you're not getting my products and services for free. You're getting a bit of my knowledge for free. And that will set you apart from other people who feel like they only share their knowledge if there's money in hand.
Yes. Yeah. No, you're spot on. I mean, and most people are aware of the law of attraction, right? The law of
And
manifestation.
reciprocity.
Yep, there's that other one. Yep, you just nailed it, right? Universal law of reciprocity. So there's a law that literally says that the more value you add and the more you put out into the universe, it's a 10-to-1 return. So I love the fact that you brought that up because it's so true. And especially today, people are skeptical. People are afraid of being burned, and they have good reason to be because we had years and years of people screwing people over in the world of business and also
Yeah,
screwing people over in the game of sales. They said one thing and they didn't deliver. And so this
exactly.
is really where the integrity and the authenticity comes into play. And I couldn't agree with you more in terms of add value, add benefit to their life, whether they decide to move forward and pay you or not. Now, what I will also tell you is there is absolutely a strategic way that you can do this without giving away the farm.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so, without going into a dissertation on psychology, the value add that you give, you open loops. So you give them value, but you don't give them every step of the puzzle. You give them, here's what the cake is going to taste like versus here's every step along the way of how to bake the cake. Right. So there's definitely some magic that can happen within that. All right. So moving right along. So you're going to add value. Then we're going to test close again. So this next test close, so number 5, is we're going to say, hey, you just told me those were the problems and challenges you're facing. It's been going on for this long. I just shared with you a framework that I truly believe and know would solve those problems. Do you see why so many people are getting incredible results with us, just like you? So we're connecting the dots. You have that big ass problem. We have this solution to help solve that problem. Is it connecting in your brain? We solve the problem that you currently have. Okay. We have to get them to say yes. And if they don't, we go back because we missed something. Okay. All right. So number 5, pretty straightforward. As soon as they say yes, absolutely. Great. Now we're going to go into our program or our offering. So I'm one of those people that I like to make things really easy to understand. And especially in the world of coaching or consulting, most people don't understand our orbit. They don't understand what our product deliverables are, and it's confusing for them. Like, why do I need that, or do I need to pay for that? I'm not really certain why I need to. So I love using a metaphor for learning a new language. And so actually, are we okay on time, Kim? If we walk through this real quick.
You got a minute and a half.
Woo! Okay, we're gonna go quick. All right. So Kim, if you're gonna learn a new language, what language would you pick?
French.
French. Okay, beautiful. So if you're going to go about learning French, what are the creative ways you could learn French?
Well, school didn't work too well.
I agree with
Uh,
that.
I'd probably do something like Babbel because I see it advertised all the time.
Okay, beautiful. All right, what would be the best way to learn French?
Plunk myself down in Quebec for a while and don't leave until I learn it.
Beautiful. You just hit the nail on the head. So what we like to look at is what we refer to as full immersion. So you could do Babbel or an app, right? You could go take a class like you tried in elementary school or high school, right? We could go to the country. We could hire a private tutor. Where we look at things where people really become fluent is when they do all of those simultaneously. So imagine we went to
Yeah.
Quebec with a private tutor and you're doing Babbel and you're watching TV shows and blah, 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 blah. That's exactly how we've set up our program. We have online course piece. We have a one-on-one coaching. We have a weekly accountability. So we laid out. So I always like, before we tee into our program, you want to use a metaphor that people can answer questions, that's how they already get the outcome, and then connect your product or service. So they're not questioning whether or not they need those pieces. They can connect the dots of, they already told you that's what they need. Okay. So that's the program piece. And then lastly is price, or the investment.
Mm.
Okay. So why this is really critical and why we want to highlight this. If you start out with price early in the game, it's going to put people up in their head. We want to have an
Yeah.
emotional conversation for 95% of the dialogue, and then a logical piece at the very, very back. So I know we're going to get pinched on time. So there's some creative ways to weave in pricing, but that for the purposes of time today, more than anything, stay in that sequence: intro, discovery, test, value add, test, give them your program, and then price.
I think, Brooke, we're going to have you back, and we'll do a deep dive into some of these ones because I think that there's so much more that we can go into, but we are starting to run out of time, and I want to make sure that we talk about your book because it's the one segment we do with every single author that comes on the show. So, are you ready for the question, Brooke?
Let it rip.
Okay, actually, I have to ask you one thing first. So, take a minute. Tell us what your book is and give us a very quick introduction. Then I will ask you the question.
The book, I feel like Vanna White. Here it is. Book is called Coaching Equation, and it takes the 7 steps that we just walked through. It breaks down each of those pieces. In addition to that, we go over the core pieces for a coach to be successful and most importantly, profitable. So we have a whole segment on how to do your marketing, a whole segment on your sales, and how to add even more value so that your fulfillment is next level. But yeah, in terms of where to find that, if somebody's in the coaching space or they want to break into the coaching space, as mentioned earlier, oftentimes it can be more valuable to know what not to do versus what to do. So we really want to help people avoid the pitfalls. But yes, we're on Amazon. So if you look up Coaching Equation, we're on Amazon, and it's a very simple read. And we break things down into the ridiculous of do this, don't do that.
Love it. Love it. Okay, Brooke. So, audience, you know what question's coming up next? Brooke, what was the good, the bad, and the ugly about writing, editing, and publishing that book?
Ooh, the concept was really easy in my mind. I'm like, ooh, I want to cover these pieces. When I actually sat down to map it out and like put it into something that was coherent and also wove in a story behind a how-to books can tend to be pretty boring and cut and dry. Because of my background with Tony and some of the biggest names in the game of personal development, I have a lot of really crazy wild stories, like jumping off bridges in the middle of the night or swimming with sharks or like just literally some crazy
Firewalking
stuff. Lots of firewalking. We've walked through
for Dave?
arrows. Yeah, crazy stuff. Uh, so for me to weave in the story components to make it something that people would want to read front to back at the same time making it educational, that was where I really found like, okay, how do I bridge the gap on that? Once we bridged the gap there, the next challenging piece was how the heck do we make this thing into an actual physical, tangible thing? And like, how do we get out to the world? How do we navigate the world of getting, things published, whether we self-published and we have another book that we actually did full publishing front to back. It's a minefield of, I just didn't know what I didn't know. And it was way more challenging. Even format, honestly, the thing that pissed me off more than anything, figuring out how to format. Oh, I might have gone through a couple laptops just trying to figure out how to format things. But yes, there was definitely a lot of landmines. So if you can find somebody to help you navigate and get your book crafted and published, take that. I'm assuming that that's probably a huge piece of value you can add to people's worlds, Kim. But Yes. I don't know if I answered that question properly, but there was a lot of hiccups getting that thing done.
So you didn't really answer the ugly. What was, you talked about forming a bit, but was there one thing that just, you felt like, okay, this book's never going to be published, or after it was published, you felt like, why on the earth did I ever even publish this thing?
Yeah, yes. So that so growing up in the third grade, no, I'm not. I know we don't have time for that. But I grew up with an artist for a stepfather, and what I watched him toil over and over and over again is his paintings were never finished until they were sold. And what I noticed with writing the book is even now I can still go back to it. I'm like, oh, I want to say that differently, or I want to change that up. If I didn't publish and actually if I didn't have the person coaching me through that to say it's done, move forward, I'd still be editing, tweaking it, changing the painting.
Oh, the perfection trap. I deal with that with the clients all of the time. Oh, wow. I can't believe this half an hour has gone by so fast,
Yeah,
Brooke.
it was fast.
But we do need to close it off. So I would love for you to share one final thought, and then how can people connect with you?
Couple, only one. One final thought. If you're on the fence with getting your book done, first and foremost, get that thing done. It'll position you as an expert. It's an amazing lead magnet. It's an incredible way of establishing yourself as the authority. It's also, we were talking about give away the farm. You can give away so much in your book so people can understand who you are and your core and your soul and your authentic voice. And it makes sales, anybody who's read my book, holy cow, sales is so much easier because I don't have to do all of those things in a conversation. There's a lot of
Mm.
value that can be added prior to that doesn't have to come up in a call. So my last tidbits, if you're on the fence with your book, get that thing done. If you don't have a book as a tool, as a weapon in your sales arsenal, heck yeah, get that thing knocked out. And then in terms of the sales piece, make a commitment to master your sales craft. It's, again, you might have the best marketing in the world, but if you can't enroll, Lord help us. So yeah.
Brooke, how can people connect with you?
Uh, empirepartners.io. So empirepartners.io. We have a number of different ways to help people. Obviously, if you guys want to pick up the book, if you're an avid reader, on Amazon is Coaching Equation. And yeah, there's two ways that people can digest. Oh, one last one. We also do have our podcast that's also called The Coaching Equation. So three ways.
Sorry, I didn't catch that, Brooke. What was it called?
Yeah. So number one would be empirepartners.io is our website.
Okay.
If you want to read or pick up the book, it's called Coaching Equation. It's on Amazon. And then our podcast is also called The Coaching Equation.
The coaching equation. Awesome.
Three
We'll
ways
make
to
sure
engage.
those get in the show notes. Brooke, thank you so much for being on today. Audience, if you are wondering where to go next, so we talked a little bit about Dave Sanderson. And Dave Sanderson is a very good friend of Larry Levine, and that's actually how I met Dave, was through Larry. So today's recommended episode is Larry Levine and Daryl Amy, Selling from the Heart, episode 427. If you're watching here on YouTube, you know that my daughter has placed the thumbnail somewhere here on the screen for you to click. And if you're on your favorite podcast app, you are going to be scanning back with your finger about 70 episodes. But I promise you that, if you want to increase your sales, take what Brooke said today and then add some selling from the heart with it, and you will have an amazing conversation. Thanks so much for listening, and we will see you on the very next episode. Bye now.